Nintendo are masters at maintaining the franchises they care about. I referred to Nintendo as the Disney of video games in the past, as the only other company with a more valuable stable of IP than Nintendo is Disney, and even they can't compete with the way Nintendo fosters their franchises. If we're being real, Nintendo is virtually unmatched in this regard. Obviously, there are levels to this. Not all of Nintendo's franchises get the same attention, and many of their franchises go through long seasons of getting no attention at all. That's a different problem that I hope their growth as an entertainment brand begins to solve, but it doesn't change the fact that their foundational skill of honoring the franchises they choose to maintain is phenomenal. The distinction comes in how thorough they are in honoring a given franchise's legacy once they turn their attention to a given property, and Donkey Kong Bananza has really helped me to appreciate this as the best example of it happening in recent memory. This game truly is fan fiction in the best way imaginable. Like in a video on this channel I made about 2 years ago, a lot of what we see in this game was something I threw out as a pie in the sky idea. And not only did Nintendo do a lot of the things I hoped for in that, they went even further than I would have guessed they would. Donkey Kong Bananza is truly a love letter to the entirety of the Donkey Kong legacy. From the franchise's very early origins, alluded to with the teenage Pauline, whose inclusion will absolutely retroactively explain or at least hint at an explanation for DK and her dynamic in that original Donkey Kong arcade game, to the Rare era with the Animal Buddies, Cranky, Diddy, and Dixie Kong, full 2D platforming sections, many of which are all but directly ripped from the Donkey Kong Country games, to the brand new additions to the world and lore that not only feel in line with all of the franchise's history, but every new thing that we've seen elevates the franchise to a level that I'd argue it hasn't been on in terms of stacking up to its contemporaries since the SNES era. That's the last time that a game in the Donkey Kong franchise stood toe to toe with the most ambitious games in a given generation. Donkey Kong Country on SNES was a technical marvel and stands firm as one of, if not the most impressive games from that generation. And as far as gameplay is concerned, it's in line with what were the highest expectations for the time. Obviously, DK64 tried to reach the bar set by the likes of Mario 64, but many would say it fell short. And I would argue, given the lack of representation that game receives, that Nintendo even agrees with this assessment. And while Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze are great games in their own right, they lack the sheer ambition of Super Mario Galaxy and even 3D World during their respective eras. Donkey Kong Bananza, on the other hand, is an easy frontrunner for most exciting and impressive Switch 2 game in its first year, and I could absolutely see it holding firm as a top-tier experience as we move through Switch 2's life. All of that is to say, Donkey Kong Bananza is having a lot of fun playing around with the world of Donkey Kong to create something wholly new. Like, obviously, the Donkey Kong and Pauline history runs deep, but this new angle of that dynamic is sure to make that history a lot more interesting moving forward, whether this is a redemption story, a time traveling story, a multiversal story, or anything in between. Nintendo has always been gameplay first. More often than not, Nintendo thinks of mechanics that will be fun to have in a game. They then decide what characters fit those mechanics, new or old, and then they craft a story and lore around all of that. I think this is at the core of why their franchises generally stand the test of time. The games that do this consider the broader gaming landscape first, and that's why new games feel fresh even though the franchises are frequently decades old that they originate from. On the other hand, I think it allows for some of the most fun lore to engage with because by way of this gameplay first approach, they avoid boxing themselves in by instead opting to leave most everything up to interpretation. And by focusing on lore over direct story, they allow the player to decide for themselves what it all means and how much it should matter to their experience. This is an interactive medium after all, even if it seems every other story-focused studio seems to forget that. Nintendo is essentially alone in its ability to have their franchises have multiple eras of peak. Every other major IP holder in their lane either let their older franchises completely die or they string them along as mere shadows shadows of their former selves and frail attempts to capitalize on their brand recognition. As someone that spends a lot of time thinking about ways modern gaming tech and sensibilities could be used to evolve beloved franchises from older eras, Nintendo is frequently the gold standard for how to do it right. Breath of the Wild in particular is a frequent go-to, and fortunately for me, it seems to be seen as a guiding light for many of Nintendo's first-party and closely affiliated studios as of late. You can see its DNA all over Donkey Kong Bananza. Obviously, this game is a pretty direct evolution of Super Mario Odyssey in all of the ways I touched on, and I'm sure more we have yet to see, given the likelihood that Bananza is being helmed by the same team that worked on that game. But I think Breath of the Wild's influence can't be understated. So much of Donkey Kong Bananza benefits from design principles that have faint fingerprints in Super Mario Odyssey, but are core to Breath of the Wild. And there are pretty obvious lessons learned seen in Bonanza that were absent in Odyssey altogether, but masterfully done in Breath of the Wild and later Tears of the Kingdom. Namely, the comparative openness of the game. Obviously, Mario Odyssey is a pretty open game in the context of Mario, but in the grand scheme of things, the variance in how you can approach levels is tied to an execution barrier, whereas in Breath of the Wild and later Tears of the Kingdom, it's more about creativity. Bonanza's openness is closer to the latter in my opinion. You can entirely level a given sub-level of the world to get what you need done in a lot of scenarios, and that sort of freedom is something that excites me a lot. Donkey Kong Bonanza seems to be the kind of game that dares the player to try to break it, and I will absolutely be one of the players that will take up that challenge in my quest for the most interesting, fun alternate paths to success in the game. And you already know speedrunners will crack Bonanza wide open as well. I'm very excited to learn all of the crazy things they come up with that will be all over our social media feeds in the next few weeks. I think another underappreciated aspect of Nintendo's approach to long-running franchises is their ability to have meaningful cross-cultural collaboration. And Donkey Kong in particular is a shining example of exactly this. Not many franchises survive a change of hands in the way that the DK brand has. Not only once, but twice, and it's going for a third. It's a game series that began its life as a Japanese creation, was reimagined by a British studio years later, then years after that it was revived by a team in Austin, Texas, and now Donkey Kong is being carried further into the future by a new team, presumably out of Japan, where it all started. All of these teams stood on the shoulders of the ones that preceded them and all built onto the world in a way that enabled what Donkey Kong Bonanza is now. That can't really be said for any other IP holder in the industry, and this isn't even close to the only example of Nintendo specifically doing exactly this, and it's yet another reason why I feel so strongly about the potential of not only this game, but all of Nintendo's beloved franchises moving forward. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the increasing likelihood that we'll continue to see bigger and better examples of exactly this scenario as time moves on. It's not a coincidence that Donkey Kong Bonanza is happening shortly after Donkey Kong's prominent inclusion in the Mario movie, or the franchise's full rollout in Nintendo's Universal Studios theme park offerings, all the way to the revised Donkey Kong design being used in Mario Kart World. All of this will be cyclical and snowball DK's popularity. Donkey Kong Bonanza will wildly succeed when everything is all said and done, and if recent history is any indication, that will lead to Nintendo doubling down. All of that said, I don't know if that necessarily means Bonanza will see any sequels this generation. I'd actually assume we don't see one, since Nintendo tends to want to limit most of their franchises to one new entry per platform. However, I wouldn't be surprised if the next 3D Mario builds on this momentum further. Maybe Diddy and Dixie Kong get some kind of Bonanza DLC, sequel, or even spin-off love. Nintendo has been utilizing their secondary characters more after all, so it wouldn't be the first time they did something like this. More likely than that, I wouldn't be shocked if Bonanza's success leads to an entirely different, unrelated Nintendo franchise receiving similar cross-media star treatment to itself either. Breath of the Wild accomplished all of the above with its unprecedented success, and I think Nintendo is confident it can replicate this playbook with all of its franchises eventually. It's worth repeating that while Nintendo used to describe themselves as a toy company, they have since updated that take, now describing themselves as an entertainment company. This means to me that they are embracing the fact that their most valuable offering is their IP. And I think it's a safe bet to assume this means their primary goal is to increase the amount of mega blockbusters rather than solely relying on Mario and Pokemon as reliable means to shift console sales like they have in the past. Not for nothing, Switch 1 already saw a lot of franchises level up in importance. Metroid saw a level up on Switch and is being prepped to further this growth with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond later on this year on Switch 1 and 2. Kirby is similar, with Forgotten Land in particular netting that franchise recent and inevitable future success with the upcoming Switch 2 edition. Splatoon received 2 massive releases on Switch and has already been given a spin-off announcement for Switch 2. Honestly, every Nintendo franchise that saw love on Switch in some way saw at least some growth, and I think it's pretty clear that this wasn't lost on Nintendo. We will be seeing this trend continue and evolve. We will see more Animal Crossing Horizons situations where franchises people underestimated succeed wildly. And I, for one, welcome all of it and hope that this all somehow leads to a good Ice Climber game sometime down the road. Donkey Kong Bananza was my most anticipated Nintendo Switch 2 game from the moment it was revealed. Its direct only reaffirmed that excitement, and though my heart wants to believe Pokemon Legends ZA will be my game of the year, my brain knows Nintendo EPD are significantly more sound game developers and will likely stick the landing where I fear Game Freak may stumble. For the record, that's not just a random stray for the sake of it. I just have developed an ability to predict the low bar discourse that will take place in the comments, and I know Pokemon will be used as a retort to the point of the video, as if Pokemon isn't an entirely separate entity that's handled different from Nintendo's other franchises. That's a topic unto itself that we won't get into today, but I will get to them in my next video. Make sure you get subscribed here to see it if that's something you're interested in. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, join the Discord so you know you'll see new videos and streams without relying on algorithms, and maybe check out Redirect's merch and membership site at shop.watchredirect.com, just like executive producer Trev L. Steinberg and all of these other great names you see scrolling on the screen. Okay, that's it for me. See you in the next video.